Happy Tuesday, everyone. Doesn't that little intro just make you want to have a nap? It just really makes me want to have a nap. This is apparently new for the soundboard. And of course, we're on Beyond the Outer Realm, so I can't play our traditional, uh, segment intro, but there we are. Anyway, welcome to Beyond the Outer Realm, a spin-off of the main show, The Outer Realm, which is on Wednesday and Thursday evenings, which you've all come to know and love, and we thank you and appreciate you for that. We are still broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. No sponsors. We're brand new, so we don't have to go through all of that, which means I get to go right to the good part, which is introducing my very dear friend, Nathaniel Gillis. And he's been on the main show. We all know him. We all love him. He's just wonderful. He's got so many interesting things to say. This is going to be no different. So how it was put to me, discussing the phenomenon of using aggressive mimicry when manifesting. And some of you guys are probably going, what? I know you have to have an understanding behind all of this to know where it's going, but I can assure you it's going to be magnificent because it always is. Without further ado, hello. How are
Hello,
you?
hello, my friend. It's great to be back with you, and congrats on
Thank
the new
you.
show. You're going
Thank
to do
you.
amazing as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's this is a little pet project that's turning out to be a lot of fun, and
Mhm.
it's gives us a little bit more flexibility, shall we say?
Yeah.
And uncensored shows seem to people really seem to dig it. So I think we're
Mhm.
going to have a lot of fun. So I have to say, you have me perplexed with this one. I mean, I get what it is. I get where
Mhm.
you're going to go with it, and because I have a basic understanding of the whole mechanics of how things work. But
Mhm.
this is definitely the way you have it broken down, something that has piqued my curiosity because you always dig really deep into things and you dissect things, which is
Mhm.
what makes it that much more interesting because you give perspectives that you may not otherwise think about. Okay.
I hope so. I appreciate the compliment. It is kind of it's like a byproduct of my extreme ADHD, right? If I don't like something, I have no interest in it. It doesn't matter what happens. If I
Right.
do like something, I'm going to try to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
But in my research, not just in academia, or literature, but also in case studies I've had in my own career, I started encountering entities that were mimicking other life forms in order to
Mm.
blend into our reality. And I got to a certain point in my career where I was like, okay, this is not a bug in the phenomenon. This is a feature.
Hmm.
And to where, especially in Ikigai cases, was my first encounter with this particular nuance. But the phenomenon would mirror the perception of the experiencer, or it would tailor its appearance to the belief system of the experiencer. And then at a certain point in time, the phenomenon would remove that archetypal mask, and now you're interfacing with something that you really have no framework for. It's something completely different and,
Hmm.
quote, alien to us. And so my conclusions are perhaps disturbing, but I think they're relevant to the conversation. And that is that the archetype is just another way
Hmm.
for the phenomenon to be present with us, but absent
Hmm.
from us at the same
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
to where the mask it wears will moderate human behavior
Hmm.
and perhaps even inspire evolution within our species. And then at
So
this,
that's really deep because that takes you in a whole other direction, doesn't it?
oh, it does, absolutely. And so it's a common pathology in the phenomenon. I think it's one that deserves more attention in the field,
Mhm,
because at some point we start to realize that we can't trust everything that appears
mhm,
benign.
mhm,
That there is some form of aggressive and at times parasitic mimicry
mhm, mhm,
present, in that we are often being courted by a phenomenon that not doesn't have our best interests in mind, and it appears right, love
yeah,
and light, up
mm,
to a certain degree, and then we are left after the initial event feeling manipulated, betrayed,
mm,
violated,
mhm,
and completely absolved of any reality. So there are case studies we can get into, but that's my contextual framework for today's show, is that at some point when we look at the behavioral patterns, we as people have to look and say, okay, is it possible that all of these archetypes are merely emanations of a singular intelligence that is using various masks in order, like I said, not to just manipulate us, but to inspire evolution?
Hello, Mark from the UK. How are you, darling? Yeah, people are realizing, wait, they're on. No, it's no, it runs really deep, because I think I started just touching on how much everything connects on the grand scheme of things, getting into the paranormal. Like you and I've talked about this before, how I think in the world of the paranormal, we can say, demonics or other ethereal beings. And, if you're in the world of ufology, a demonic might be a reptilian or draconian, or shadow people seem to fall under both. And in the world of cryptids as well. Then we get into the whole tulpomancing, like we've talked about before as well. So this just seems to be like the next level of where you're going with all of this research.
Absolutely, yeah. So tulpomancy, essentially, at least from according to my perspective, is the idea that we can create thought forms. And yet the research confirms that, but it also confirms a deeper pathology, in that there's an entity forming the thought that becomes a thought form. And so there is this is fascinating too, this co-creation of the archetype between us and the phenomenon. I'm so fascinated by that. I've been thinking about it for the last month. We become co-creators of the archetype the phenomenon incarnates as. And this is why I think it's so easy to be manipulated, because it's almost like the phenomenon's manifesting to us and manifesting through us at the same time. And so it's much easier to kind of moderate our behavior and make choices for us if we believe we're the ones making them.
Yes. See, and I like how you put that. If we believe that we are the ones making those choices.
The illusion of control, And I'm going to get some share some of my own cases, and then I'm going to get in some other people's work here as well. But I realized a long time ago, when I went to bed one night after work, and I was in the middle of this dream where I'm battling this featureless shadow woman, and she's straddling me, and nothing weird or seductive. It was just it was a strange position. And I'm like, okay, what the heck's going on? And I'm trying to push her off of me in the nightmare. And that's when I woke myself up, and I start slapping my fiance at the time. Is this you?
Yeah.
Not hard, mind you. But just, tapping her on the sides. Is this you, Ellie? Is this you? And that's when she was startled awake. And she looked at the entity and said, "What is that, babe? What is that?" That's when one leg went over and she just kind of dissolved into the darkness. But it was after that initial encounter, that's when I started realizing that it was almost as if you took my ex, now my fiance, it's almost as if you took Ellie, put her in a dark room, turn the lights off. Same body type, same long hair, everything looked like her, just with the lights off. And so that's when I started questioning that there has to be a relationship, like a co-creation of the archetype, to where the phenomenon was quite literally hacking into my own consciousness in order to formulate a mask to interface with me. And I know that's deep, but I think that's
hello, Heidi.
Thank you for tuning in. That's a good contextual framework to kind of launch us into understanding some of these other case studies, which we'll get into. So just let me know where you want me to go.
The stage is yours.
Yeah. Oh,
the stage is yours. We're uncensored. We are let's go crazy mode, and you go. I'll keep up. I promise.
I know you will. I you know me, I have ADHD. I'm like, all right, I've got all these. So here's the deal. We know the phenomenon can mimic. We know that it has the ability to be co-creators with the archetype alongside of us. And now what we're looking for is behavioral patterns within the case studies that kind of reveal a uniting pathology. And what's crazy is, and we'll see this here in a second, is that the phenomenon is demonstrating this ability in all of phenomenology. When we're looking at parapsychology, we're looking at hauntology, ufology, UFO abduction phenomenon, the phenomenon has the ability to literally co-create with us. And so I'm going to go into some case studies. We'll see. Okay, so in 1845, this is called the Emily Sage case, or quote, the vanishing twin.
Ooh, I think I heard of this.
Yes, a school teacher in Latvia was at the center of one of the most famous doppelganger cases. Multiple students and staff reported seeing her spectral double alongside her. At the same time she's teaching, there is another entity that is mimicking not just her appearance, but literally her body movements as she's teaching.
Wow.
Blew my mind.
Wow.
And they said that whenever they would interact or interface with this entity, now it's fascinating because it's like, okay, just reading it gives me the creeps, but when you put yourself in their position and they're witnessing this entity next to the school teacher, whenever they would approach her or it, it would slowly dissolve and dematerialize.
Wow. So it was aware. It was aware.
It was aware. This is a part of the learning matrix employed by the phenomenon. I had a case study not too long ago of an abductee. I'm going to kind of give a case here, and I'm going to kind of give another testimony from my research too.
Of course.
And she was being abducted by the phenomenon from being a little girl. And whenever it would manifest, the entity would look like her favorite cartoon character and her favorite comic book character. And so the phenomenon stopped manifesting for like 2 or 3 years. But during those 2 years, they were extremely formative in her life. And so now she's growing taller. She's more mature. She no longer watches those those cartoons and now it's manifesting again to her, my friend.
It's like an evolution of sorts.
There we go. And that is a beautiful point. The phenomenon is evolving. And so in this particular case study, it manifests again, but now she's 2 feet taller than it. She's no longer eye level because she's not a child anymore. And this is what's so fascinating, where the learning matrix employed, it was almost like a program that could only upload certain amount of data. And so they kept trying to evolve, and yet there was no frame of reference in her consciousness. And so that's when she realized, it's incredible, it's a fascinating case, but she said that when it could no longer evolve according to her awareness of it, there was no image to inhabit. She said that its eyes looked into her eyes and began to move. And this is the only way she put it. It felt like it was measuring my belief in the image it was manifesting as.
See, that comes down into the acknowledgement is empowerment thing that I always talk about, in acknowledging all of that and its evolution and its growth and its the way it's intelligence. Her believing in it is what's giving it the power, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
It's the presence of the archetype. When believed in, it starts to literally download some power source of consent. That's the only way I can put it. And it strengthens. Now, in my research, I've highlighted the aspect of the archetype. And then there's a proto-intelligence, what I've called a proto-intelligence, that wears that archetype when it's manifesting. But believe, and this is to your point, my friend, believing the archetype, it helps that entity incarnate more. It strengthens its presence.
Which
and so,
to this question, can you just while we're on that specific one, Kathy says, do you think that the entity was the higher self? Perchance.
I don't know if it's higher. It's a good question. It was either higher or within. Now we're getting into angelology and the ancient Ugaritic understanding of what the Molech, or in Hebrew, the Molechim was. One idea was, this is another interconnectivity, was that their definition of the angel within was the inner guide. And this
Yeah.
gets into some of the Rephaim, Nephilim literature. And it
Yes.
all that particular aspect of it, it originated in the Atreus epic where it says the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god. And so you would have, in certain cases of
Mm.
bilocation, right? You'd
Mhm.
have the projection of the entity within, and they
Mhm.
would look like each other because one originated, right,
Yes.
from the
Yes.
copy.
Very fascinating. Wow. Good one,
It's
Kathy.
heavy. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
I love
fascinating
it.
question.
It's a whole other show
And
I think we should do. So,
absolutely, right? It's yeah, and this gets into some of Luis Elizondo's research
mhm.
where he talks about some experiments they were running in the government where they were remote viewing a terrorist suspect
Mhm.
and just to see what they could do. And so,
Mhm.
like a few days later, they get a phone call from his lawyer, and he repented of everything he did. And
Mhm.
they asked him why, and he said because there were three angels in my cell last night. And it just so happened to be the night, right, that the remote
Yeah.
viewers had projected themselves into his room.
Interesting. That's interesting how
So,
that manifested.
oh, yes. So is it possible, just throwing this out there before we head even deeper into the pathology here,
Yeah.
it's possible that what we are calling aliens are a form of practitioners who are projecting their consciousness into our
Mm.
rooms in abductions to where it would answer the question as to why do they have bodies but they can walk through a wall.
Mhm. Mhm.
That would be another option.
Everything's connected. Everything
It
seems
is.
to go full circle. I think if you could just get into the dynamics of it and break it down, it could be sky's the limit on that one too,
It,
So,
it is, and
mhm.
it points to, of course, this could be us. And then
Mhm.
growing up in church, I had, missionary stories come to me all the time where a missionary
Yeah.
was in prayer and they triggered they didn't call it bilocation, of course, but it was.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and one specific story was that it was a woman and she was, later on, she would become a missionary in Africa. But anyway, she was in prayer and she's in prayer. She's in Africa and she's given the gospel to this African. And
Mhm.
then like 10 years later, she's in Africa in the same location, and a man
Mhm.
comes to her and says, "I haven't seen you in a decade."
Mhm.
Right? So it's really weird
Mm.
stuff, but
Yeah. Mm.
the phenomenon does have the ability to trigger bilocation in people. This was done with Tammy Stone, an abductee who this is I think in the 60s, where she was driving on a dirt path, a dirt road, sees this metallic object approaching her car, and she walks outside of it, and instantly she went from looking at the object above her head to being in the object and looking down at her body.
Mhm.
I have another case study. A good friend of mine who's a researcher in New England. This is another really wild one.
Mhm.
But we were talking one day, just talking about research. He said, Nathaniel, he goes, I feel compelled to share this story with you. I'm not going to name him,
Mhm.
uh, but he's like, this is my origin story. This is how I got into the field. I said, okay, what's going on? He said, well, when he was a kid, that he would he would always come down sick with something.
Mhm.
And sometimes it was a disease that they got rid of finally. Other times it was just the flu that was really bad. He said, but he realized that it was almost like the phenomenon was making him sick.
Mhm. Hmm.
And so one night he said that he was almost bedridden. He's in his room. He awakens suddenly and he sees this entity standing at the corner of his bed.
Hmm.
And he didn't know what to do. He was paralyzed in fear. And he said, next thing he knows, he's out of his body, hovering over his body. And now he's questioning where the entity is.
Mhm. Mm. Right?
That's when he
Right?
said, all of a sudden, he said, I'm out of my
Mm.
body looking down at it. That's when he said, I'm looking down at my face when my face begins to be animated, looks right up at me, and I'm
Mhm.
staring directly into my own eyes. And he said, I
Mm.
realized that's where the entity was.
Wow. So, see, that's a really big fear among
Yeah.
people who can do OBEs. and things and go, out of body, is that
Mhm.
things could just kind of jump in. So
Yeah.
in this case, is this what happened? He left out the body. Did he get booted out, or was he just having an OBE because he saw something, came up, and something else slides in? You hear about this with coma people too, right? Other jump-ins.
And in Ruth Montgomery's work with the walk-in phenomenon, it kind of fits, seamlessly.
Yeah. With sleep paralysis, you think it's
Yes.
sleep paralysis.
Yes, it's one of the ways the phenomenon can trigger by location. And of course, we have the Betty Luca case study, which is another fascinating piece of the puzzle, where it was through abductions, where she walks into her room at night and Bob Luca is on the bed in suspended animation, putting on his socks, and his apparition is running towards her screaming.
Wow. That
So,
is crazy.
well, it points to, and this is the more sinister parts of it, but it points to an intelligence that has the ability to trigger by location, to peel us out of ourselves, not just without our permission, but in many cases without our own memory.
Yeah. I'm
Two
with Taurus.
places at once.
OMG.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It can get very sinister.
Yeah.
But even in incubi literature,
yes.
there's cases in the medieval periods where, like, the phenomenon was taking witches, and again, this could be just our ancestors' interpretation, right? Them trying to rationalize the darkness that we're experiencing, and they are. But there were cases where the husband would, kiss his wife goodnight, they'd go to bed. 2 hours later, he would get up to use the restroom or get a glass of water, and he would see her in bed, same body shape, laying on her favorite side. Everything seemed to fit. But then the next morning, she would come back saying, "They took me in the night." And so their earliest understanding of this was that it was either a doppelganger or it was a familiar spirit the phenomenon had manifested to take her place.
Right. So I have to ask you this then. Are doppelgangers just manifestations of us or someone else, or is it an actual real phenomenon?
I think it's real, and I think that, again, in order for the phenomenon to evolve according to our awareness of it, it has to be present with us. But in order to be present with us, it can't be witnessed by us in its full manifestation. And so it wears the archetype. And sometimes the archetype it wears, and this is, again, the parasitic and aggressive mimicry, it blends into reality. Matter of fact, here we go. 1957, a woman named Sonora from Brazil reported an entity taking the form of her husband while he was away. Okay. When the imposter, the mimic, entered the home and it groomed her like an incubus, but something felt off. The real husband came home just to realize that she had been interacting with something completely different.
Does that not remind you of the story of Zeus when he went down? Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Appeared like the father.
Yes.
This chimera activation, I do, and I'm not a mythicist when it comes to that, right? I don't think it's just pure mythology. I think that these are real encounters with real entities, and that the archetype it's incarnating as, we're co-creating with the phenomenon. Now, to answer your question more pointedly, it's not that we're creating the phenomenon; we're just creating the archetype it's manifesting as. Does it make sense?
It does. Yes. Thank you, Michael. Yes. No, I can. Yeah. Manifestation. It goes to show you, the power of we are powerful individuals to be able to manifest, but when it's coming from an archetype, it's coming with a good oomph,
Yes.
So that's, okay. Quick question. Do you think it could be the person getting taken over from a different parallel universe and coming in? That's interesting.
It's very possible. And Matter of fact, I just watched a good series. I would recommend it. It's called Dark Matter, and
Seen it? Yeah.
wasn't that? It's pretty much what she's talking. Yeah, what's talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
it's
shows
excellent.
up, and there's like multiple.
Yes, if
Oh
you
yeah.
haven't seen it, you guys got to see it. It's definitely I always say there's a lot of different perspectives in there, but it leaves you thinking, you know.
Oh
Leaves
yeah, it
you
does.
thinking.
And then
Yes.
I like the season finale. I was like, all right, what's left now? They answered all the questions. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like, well, what am I going to watch this for? And there are some very dark implications here. I mean, even in Catholicism, there was a priest, Father Pellegrino Ernetti. He was a monk who was reportedly seen in two places at once on multiple occasions,
Mhm.
where he was performing mass
Mhm.
at one location and then perform also in another monastery in another part of the world.
Mhm.
Now, what this does though is it starts to make me question why the Vatican has kind of redrawn the lines of incarnation, right?
Yes.
People aren't
Yes.
talking about that enough, my friend, because it's not enough for them to say, hey, listen, there are angels that exist. What they're suggesting is, hey, listen, we need to test the incarnation
Mhm.
because not everything that appears angelic is.
Is. Yes. Yes. I think it's important to address that because this is the first place that people go to when they're in where they feel that they've been infiltrated, of course, is to their faith.
Mhm.
Obviously, you lean on your faith. So it's nice to see in a way that they're coming forward and say, okay, look, things are not always as they seem, but it could be not everything is demonic. There are a lot of
Right.
other things out there that have the capabilities of mimicking
Oh, yeah.
anything, right?
Anything.
And this is
Anything.
where we lose sight of the fact that it's so
Yeah.
far it's not black and white, I guess is where I'm going with it.
No. And I wish it was as binary as, people claim it to be, but it's simply not.
Yes.
And to your point, I mean, just thus far, we've done almost 30 minutes
Yes.
of cases where it's literally just the appearance,
Yes. Yes.
right? I
And
could
it goes
even
way
go,
back. That first one
of
is
course.
amazing,
Oh, yeah.
you know. So,
And it's interreligious or cross-cultural, but and I mention this all the time, probably
mm,
more than I should, but Ted Rice's case when he was abducted, they were trying to do something with his grandmother and him,
mm,
and his
mhm,
grandmother rebuked him, rebuked the entity, and said, "I've only been intimate with one man. That's been my deceased husband."
mhm,
And you see again the utterance.
mhm,
It's literally feeding into the creation of the archetype.
mhm,
There it is. And
mhm,
then the entity leaves and comes back as the deceased husband. So right
mhm,
there, we're witnessing in real time the co-creation of the interface
mhm,
itself.
mhm. Dark Matter, that's
Um,
for Netflix or
Apple
is that
TV.
Amazon?
Apple
Apple.
TV.
Yeah,
I
it'll
only
have it
know because
on
I watched it the other day. So
yeah, yeah, I think Netflix had it or Amazon, one of those 2, but at least you know right now it's on Apple TV. So,
it's good
okay.
stuff.
No,
So
next.
yeah. Now we're gonna get into again aggressive mimicry in terms of acoustics.
Oh, beautiful.
Where right
Beautiful.
again we just done
Frequency.
right the image exactly right. And the reason this got my attention was because I was having cases where I witnessed this phenomenon, and then specifically incubus and incubi
Yes.
entities, and then I started studying mimicry in biology, and
Mhm,
right marine animals is fascinating.
mhm,
And so number one behind me there's a book called Beyond UFOs. It's by a group that Ray Hernandez, I think, created,
mhm,
and it's a compendium, compilation of cases of non-human entities and the way they interact with our species.
mhm,
In one of those cases, a little girl tells her story, or at least an adult tells her story about when she was a little girl, and she says that she was startled awake in the middle of the night, and she heard her mother's voice calling to her
mm,
by name
mm,
come out into the living room. And so she gets out of bed, being manipulated by the phenomenon, obeys the command of who she thinks is her mother,
Mhm.
only to see both her mother and her father in the bathroom in suspended animation, paralyzed.
Oh, so okay. So is mom projecting to warn the her daughter, or is the phenomenon calling the daughter out to put her in the same situation? Because when you're in suspended
100%.
animation, you could
Mhm,
project out your energy. Nothing. I mean, a parent's love, especially a mother's love, to try to reach out is
mhm.
also
Oh, it's
pretty
deep.
pretty gripping. Yeah.
Right. Well,
Wow. Wow.
her
Wow.
story was that
Okay.
she's in the hallway and that
Hmm.
there was a presence in the house and she didn't understand it. She's a child. And
Right.
so, and this is another story about an entity out in the corner of the eye where
Yeah.
she sees her parents, but the sound of the voice was not coming from the bathroom where her parents were. It
Mhm.
was coming from the living room. That's when she turned her gaze, and sure enough, there was an entity. This
Mhm.
is creepy. In that room with the voice coming out of its cavity. Mouth
Oh,
is not moving, but it's her mother's voice coming
okay. See,
from the
that's
entity.
wiki. That's wiki. Yeah, that's
Acoustic mimicry.
yes. Yes. Jesus. Um,
You're like, I kind of backtrack on the uncensored thing. I'm joking.
yeah, no, I get that because I mean I know that these things can mimic, but it's interesting to witness it looking at the entity and having the acoustic at the same time. You don't often get that. They're usually lurking around in the corners. They're not all
Yeah,
brazen enough to do it. And those that are, if you're lucky to catch it or be aware of it as it's happening, because a lot of times that just goes, it's gone. You don't get to remember that.
right.
I feel like when someone's going through something or going through dark times with themselves, they can start seeing into the darker world and vibration.
Good point. And I would add to that they can start being seen by that darker world
Yeah,
and that darker vibration.
yeah.
You know, this component of acoustic mimicry is another kind of key element in phenomenology. It unites all fields of research in all archetypes.
It
Dr.
does.
Carla Turner, the late researcher,
Mm.
said that her earliest abduction experience was an entity acting like her mother and telling
Mm.
her, "I am your real mother," and kind of separating her. Right, it's very strange
Wow.
stuff. But with
Yes,
acoustic
yes. Like,
mimicry,
wow.
the murder case that I had years ago, uh, the the killer, I could say that here. I think
Yeah, 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 yeah.
the okay, yeah, the suspect entered the house with stub nose, scissors, and a knife. But the victim told me the husband did because it was the wife that was unfortunately,
Mm,
yeah. Well, the husband said that the 15-year-old murderer, her voice, like a voice, was coming out of her,
mm.
but it was a different gender. And so she was female, but the male's voice very deep and guttural.
So
And
possession?
he's absolutely 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said that the most frightening thing, obviously, was not just the killing and everything and the fear, but
Hmm.
it was the fact that her mouth was not moving. Something was using her, as one rabbi said, as an amplification of its own voice.
Right.
And so they experience that. And so it's another interconnectivity where whatever some of these beings are, they have the ability to commandeer consciousness
Hmm.
and to be co-present within the avatar, within the body, and
Hmm.
then use them to do what they want.
Hmm. That's yeah. Your typical your typical uh, possession MO.
Mhm.
But to getting into the schematics of it is fascinating, very fascinating to me. Heidi says, I also believe when one ascends, they can see into the lower vibrational
Mhm.
along with the higher vibrational energies or energy realms or the energy realms dims. Let me see if I get this. Heidi, say what you mean. No, okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. I mean, I guess yeah. If you're getting into the lower vibrational places and the higher vibrational energies, realms dim. That's what I'm thinking. We're going with that. So yeah,
Mhm.
interesting. Very interesting. But yeah, again, it just shows you how everything, in one form or another, a lot of it shows you that it's stuff we've all known, but when you break it
Mhm.
down, it gives you a much better understanding. It makes you wonder if more of these possessions are not more of alien activity, not merely
Mhm.
demonic. Finding this in my studies more and more as well.
Yeah, so I'm not sold on the demonic or the alien hypothesis. My work in necronetics
Hmm.
and the self-multiplication of
Hmm.
species is that some of these beings are interdimensional because they're formerly human. And I think that's really
Hmm.
why I'm trying to struggle, right, with what would that entity be. It would still possess some human
Hmm.
attributes, but it
Hmm.
would stand outside of space
Right.
and time, where it's outside of the room staring in. And I
Hmm.
think that would explain the knowledge that some of these beings have. So in that aspect of it, I'm
Hmm.
leaning towards former practitioners. And just as a side note, guys, I'm already starting to deconstruct some, not just the archetypes, but literally collecting sigils and matching them to former practitioners. And some of these sigils have been found on UFO abductees.
Ooh, bam. Yes. That is outstanding, actually. That's incredible information.
It's getting in dangerous territory, to be honest with you, because I don't know what will happen
Yeah.
once I get to that point. But um,
Hmm.
I mean, I'll throw this out there as kind of a
Yeah.
hint, and then we can move on to
Yeah,
some
yeah,
more cases
yeah.
of aggressive mimicry.
I want
Uh,
in.
yeah. So
Yeah, you come
one of
back.
Dr. Carla Turner's cases was an abductee who, when she was returned, would have sigils covered her body from head to toe.
Wow.
And after a certain amount of time, these sigils would disappear. I think it was 3 days. This it correlates directly with the practitioner. His name was Austin Osman Spar, who taught that sigils can be absorbed, activated, and later expelled by the body. So, what are we dealing with here? That's a
I
whole nother show.
It
Yeah.
is, and I want to do it because I
Okay.
completely I completely understand um what you're saying about that, because people use some of these sigils for protection,
Mhm.
and they'll tell you if you want it to stay, you almost have to have it branded on your
There we
physical,
go. There
right?
we go.
Which lends to that whole concept that the body absorbs it. But if it absorbs it, depending on the sigil, so you have something from, let's say, a practitioner,
Mhm.
what is that going to do? Is that, are you being
Exactly
imprinted
right.
with something that's going to keep causing you harm, or opening a door for something else to step in, and you
Mhm.
become a vessel, almost like a portal for entities? Or are you having a protection sigil? Are you having a
Mhm.
manifestation sigil? Like that is, I love sigils
It's
because
fascinating.
it's yes, it's a whole other freaking world of research. So I'm really glad you mentioned it, and I'm really
Yeah.
glad if anybody's going to dig in and find it. I think you're definitely the guy.
Thank you.
So yes,
So
pleasure,
that's
pleasure.
kind of like a little sample
Yeah,
size of what I'm researching, right?
yeah,
It's necronetics, right?
yeah,
Necromancy and genetics and what I'm calling the occult genome in our
yes,
species.
yes,
So moving on, I guess.
yes,
So
yes, yes.
another aspect of acoustic mimicry, and again, I just gave some cases of in ufology, but in 1977 with the infield poltergeist,
Hmm.
Morris Gross and a guy named Guy Playfair, There we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They went and investigated the Hodgson family, where they had Janet, who was an 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody needs to just look it up on YouTube, it's a fascinating case study. Um, but the entity that called himself Bill,
Mm-hmm.
they would literally watch as it would speak through her vocal cords.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point that it wasn't just Bill, but it would start to mimic other members of the family. And some skeptics say it was her, but if you watch closely, again, like even doctors said that it was impossible for her to make the guttural noises that were coming out of her body.
That's right.
Very strange stuff.
That's right. That's right. Which again is interesting when you think about the fact that they're not using her vocal cords, clearly.
It's something supernatural.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
this gets into the aspect of possession as not just the relocation of consciousness, but almost an attempt at the replication of life, where it could, throwing this out there, could be bodies that are seeking to inhabit a body again, or spirits that seek to inhabit a body again, rather. And I think that's what it is, and that kind of correlates with my research in necronetics, where possession to us is pregnancy to them, and that's kind of a
yes. No, I agree. You and I have touched on that before as well, and that's that leads you down. I have so many questions, but I don't want to tie it up, so I'm going to let you go, and then I'll save the questions for after. Go.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You're right. But these manifestations, again, they're cross-cultural and interreligious. And even in some of the European folklore, we have the changelings, we have the doppelgangers, we have the fae. And I'm not a mythicist in that way. I'm not somebody that says, okay, that's just pure mythology. It's folklore. It's just something that a mother tells the son when you're, trying to put him to sleep at night. I don't think that's the case. These aren't fairy tales because we're witnessing the same phenomenology occurring in modernity. They're happening all over the world every night of the week.
Yes. I look at that as, again, being ethereal beings. And the myth we just mentioned, Zeus.
Yes.
Like,
of course,
that's
creating chimeric, like creating hybrid children.
Yes.
And so then we would have to ask ourselves, what would a god be? Or, one of the things I've always wrestled with, because I grew up in Christianity, was, okay, Bible says God's a spirit. Well, what is a spirit? And historically speaking, especially in the Mediterranean, it was a disembodied spirit. That's the way they framed their worldview, right? Where a spirit was just essentially something that either had died or it's disembodied, or it's a spirit. Yeah, liminal. And but I think that's where we're at. And I think that if anything, what we're looking at are symptoms of a certain pathology, to where, again, the phenomenon is not just mimicking, but it's mimicking in almost an attempt to empower itself, right? Well, you mentioned this earlier, where it's like the more you believe that the image is the real person, the more power you give the entity wearing that mask.
Absolutely. But there's a form of integration here. I mean, if you want to get, we'll just talk about Christianity, Catholicism. Technically speaking, God is the son of Jesus Christ. That makes him a hybrid because his mother was human.
Yes.
Like,
absolutely. When you've seen me, you've seen my Father.
Yes.
Right? This gets into this whole concept of, and I think it started in Genesis, where beings, fathers, which, let me break this down real quick. In incubi literature, the most common question offered by the experiencer, the mother, was, who is my child's father? It looked like my husband until I consented, and then it changed its form. Is my husband the father, or is the entity the father? Right?
If you think about it, okay, let's break it down some more. It's the physical union that gives, like transitioning from the male to the female to the egg, which is a physical that creates the physical being.
There we go.
Right. So what happens when you're coming in from an ethereal place? Is it the type of essence that steps in, or where do we break it down here?
Okay, well, this is another side quest of us, right? Of ours tonight,
Yeah.
today rather. So in necronetics, right?
Yeah.
Necronetics
Yeah.
teaches that
Yeah.
the answer to when you've seen me, you've seen the Father is found in the idea that number one, the incubus has a body. Spirits do not present secretions and excretions.
Mhm.
Bodies do.
Mhm.
Sinistoria of Emil was collecting semen samples left on experiencers,
Mhm.
not given by the spirit. It was
Yeah.
given by a person that had a spirit within it.
Yeah.
In so right, so necronetics teaches that that some of these beings are practitioners, in that there are sigils accompanying the secretions themselves.
Mhm.
And in sigil magic, we're right back where we were, my friend. Sigil
Mhm.
magic, when accompanied, this is all stenosmus bar, when they're accompanied with secretions and biological fluids, it's
Mhm.
designed to create an elemental or a servant. So if that's combined with the fetus, then the fetus would be a biological avatar. It would be the servant, but it would
Mhm.
also be the son. And so when the entity commandeers that avatar as
Mhm.
its son,
Mhm.
you would literally have the father within the son. And when
Mhm.
you're looking at the son, you're looking
The
at
father.
the father,
Just bam.
right?
I know.
So
I
that's why
know.
they struggled with it, was like, well, what's
Mhm.
going on here? And so that's why I'm not into spectral pregnancy in terms of it
Right.
producing seed. It's always been, and even in the Apocrypha of John, it was an image of a man that looked like the husband. That's
Mhm.
the archetype. And then once it inseminated, it pulled the mask off and it's something completely different. So
Mhm.
that's that kind of,
Yeah.
that's necronetics.
That's crazy. That's all I'm gonna say. It's deep.
Yeah,
Deep,
it is.
deep. Okay, man.
But
So
yeah, but the mimicry is present, and I'm afraid to say that a lot of this mimicry is designed not just to moderate our behavior, to
Mhm.
gain our consent,
Mhm.
but in a way it's even been to move us into locations that mimic reality.
Mhm.
And then when the wool is removed over our eyes and we start to realize that it's not just mimicking the appearance of loved ones,
Mhm.
right? And we'll get into some of the acoustic mimic cases as well. Um,
Mhm.
but it has the ability to literally hide in plain sight. And so my focus here as of late
Mhm.
has been what's going on
Mhm.
in this interface. And it's not just that when we believe in the image, it's empowering the intelligence. It's like there's a learning matrix employed,
Mhm.
and it's leaning on us. Now, if you really want to get deep, in the observer effect, the entity is making sense?
Oh,
Where
absolutely. I'm on board. Yeah.
okay,
You won't
where
lose me.
it's the observer, right? Reality changes based upon it being observed. I
Mhm.
think that plays a role in the creation of the archetype, to the
Mhm.
point that the observer is the one being observed.
Mhm.
So we are co-creating this, but that's
Mhm.
not to say there isn't a real proto-intelligence behind it
Mhm.
that's saying, why don't you suggest what you want me to be? I'll be that, but only in order to get you to consent, believe,
Mhm.
to where
Mhm.
you're in a compromising position, and then afterwards, all bets are off.
You know what? It goes back to when a child is manipulated by a being or an entity
Mhm.
that comes in pretending to be another child, to try to
Oh
win
yeah,
this trust, to try to fabricate a friendship where
yes,
the human child starts to feel confident and safe and completely,
mm,
completely molds the relationship. And a lot of times it's what that child needs at that time.
yes,
Ironically, all the characteristics fit, and then the comfort level changes. And as soon as that child says, yes, I'll accept you, come in and play,
yeah.
all hell breaks loose.
Right, yes. And to your point, and this is okay. I
But
love this
as an
conversation.
example, just
Yes.
as a mere example for the layman.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
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 So, well, okay. So in my encounters in homes,
Mhm.
there was a certain time in my career where I believed I was encountering two intelligences at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
okay, it'd be demonic, and there's something else out there that
There's
seems to
something
be
else. Yeah.
more evasive and more powerful. It
Mhm.
wasn't until I started doing deeper research and kind of bouncing back and forth between doing in-home investigations and reading case studies in
Mhm.
literature. So I realized that what I was seeing was not two entities that were co-present. It was one entity wearing the archetype of another.
Yeah. Which it shows you the level of intelligence.
We're talking about something that the only thing that approximates it in our world would be artificial intelligence that employs a learning matrix. But even like when I was
Yeah.
a kid, when you mentioned the child
Mhm.
aspect of it, it kind of not triggered me in a bad way, but it triggered my memory. What I
Mhm.
encountered was exactly that. I moved
Mhm.
into a new house, and what I thought was an apparition of a deceased girl well, I didn't even think that. I thought she belonged to the neighborhood. And then when I realized after knocking
Wow.
doors and playing with the kids, that not only did she not belong there, she had never lived there. And
Mhm.
so if that was wrong, maybe she's not even an apparition. And
Mhm.
so you're right in that sense, because it was trying again to court me and moderate my behavior,
Mhm.
gain trust. And
Mhm.
then once I blew through that archetype, that's when it evolved.
Mhm.
Now it's the shadow figure. Now
Mhm.
it's the disembodied voices conversing with each other at
Mhm.
nighttime.
Mhm.
So there's a lot going on here. Um, yes. So I have other cases, but this is fascinating. So you're
I
helping
love
me
it.
dive into this.
No, man,
Yeah.
let's just do it. Let's just do it. Yeah, go on because
So
we spin off every case that you make mention of. So let's do it.
oh, I know. So and here's another older one
Okay.
in 1817 in Tennessee. This is the Bell Witch haunting,
Oh,
and
mm,
another one
that's a
that
good
people
one.
try to discredit. And
Yes.
of course, I think there were some things that are really weird,
Uh-huh.
but it's just another case that there are, I believe, again, real things that occurred.
Mhm.
And so this entity could literally mimic the voices of other family members,
Mhm.
even when they weren't even in the house.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they would think, okay, that's my mother, that's my father, that's my brother, that's my sister. And it's not, it's the
Mhm.
phenomenon.
Yes. Yes.
That's weird.
It is weird, and what I find weirder, and
Mhm,
I'm really interested in your thoughts on this,
mhm.
is a lot of them believe that it was poltergeist induced with the older daughter, with the abuse
Yeah,
of her father, this sort of thing. But again, where does you look at the witch that the Bell Witch herself, people are like,
yeah.
oh, this is just manifested. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? It looks like we're dealing with two entirely different
Mhm.
energies here.
It very well could be.
Yeah.
One of the most fascinating aspects of this case is when it would imitate the voices of neighbors and visitors
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
before they even arrived. And so, in a
Mhm.
way, it was almost like it had kind of this uh, structure surrounding them. And when, like it was like an information zone where if someone
Yeah.
breached it,
Mhm.
okay, then it started incarnating as the neighbors before they arrived.
Mhm.
I'm this, I'm that.
Mhm.
In this gets into a very sinister aspect too,
Mhm.
where even more than the acoustic mimicry and the image mimicry, now we get into the entities mimicking prayers
Mhm.
and sermons
Mhm.
in different voices. Now, imagine you're at home one night and all of a sudden you hear the phenomenon preaching to you in a man's voice,
Mhm.
but you know the man and you
Mhm.
know the man's not there.
Mhm.
That would freak me out.
It is when it's somebody you know. We had that
Yes.
phenomenon, at, our last house because it was haunted, and they would
Mhm.
call out by name and mimic the family members, and it was a very unique location. A lot of times it was done in warning, not that it
Mhm.
hasn't on occasion happened,
Right.
with I always say the infiltration, but on an average, it's like the mimicking, trying to warn the family members, there's an intruder on the property. There's,
That's
like,
interesting.
it was very interesting because you're sort of like expecting it to be a mimic. See, Wayne actually mentions it. He goes, I was living in a haunted house, which was our home. There was a moment when I heard my son call me, and it was at the same moment he heard me call him. And my son at that time was 22 years old, so he wasn't a little kid. Right. And they call them in names that they don't usually call each other, which is strange.
There we go. That's the learning matrix, where even in images, I had a case where now we're kind of cross-referencing, whatever.
No, that's okay. Go
It's all the same. So this particular individual, I had just done a show on incubi experiences and stuff.
Yes.
Well, she reaches out to the host, who reaches out to me, and it's fascinating. So I hear her story. She said that one night she's in her bed, and as usual, her and her husband, they stay up on their phones watching their favorite shows until they fall asleep and yada, yada, whatever. Well, she says next thing she knows, her husband approaches her from the left side of the bed, and they copulate. Okay. And at the very end, she's looking at him as he returns back to the same side of the bed. And that's when she's studying the physiognomy here. You look like my husband, but sometimes it could not hold the facade. The appearance was literally, the entity was trying to hold the image, but it couldn't. And that's when sometimes there would be a flicker, and then she would realize that doesn't really seem like my husband at all. And it was soon after that she said it dissolved into a smoky apparition and floated out of the hallway to the living room and just disappeared completely. She said at the moment, she said it was almost like an energy lifted off of her. And she remembered, now this is wild, she remembered, oh my God, that could not have been my husband, because my husband's been right next to me the whole time. So this is important too for everybody that's watching and listening to this. This is some of Dr. Barry Fitzgerald's work too, and I noticed this in my own work as well, where there's a period of time between the phenomenon manifesting to us and us being controlled by the archetype that's incarnating. And so this is it points to another aspect of the phenomenon manifesting to us for a certain amount of time, and then manifesting through us, and then pushing us, manipulating our emotions to get us to believe in the image it's manifesting as.
I had a really good question to that too, with respects to it, and now I've just totally lost it. But it'll come to me. No, it's okay. It'll come back to me. Heidi wants to know. So could it be the same entity? I guess when you're hearing the different voices, the same, like
same intelligence.
Yeah, I guess that.
I think that. It's a profound question, and I think I'll just touch on this.
Yeah.
And then I think that there is a reason why we're finding ghosts, cryptids, and aliens in seances. I think there's a reason why Aleister Crowley thought he was talking to an Enochian entity that suddenly changed archetypes into an extraterrestrial. I think there's a reason in the Skull experiment when they set up their tripod overnight, came back the next morning, and they saw an alien gray, Mr. Blue, staring at them. They thought they were communicating. Again, here's the archetypes. Here's the parasitic mimicry. They thought they were communicating with deceased ancestors, people who had died and evolved into another life form or something, at least interdimensional. And yet what we're witnessing in real time is the phenomenon, okay, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. And it leads me to believe and this is just my perspective, that what we're starting to realize is that we've vetted some of these entities and they've openly lied to us. They've lied in their prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
They'll give us a little bit of information and then completely mess up the rest.
Mm-hmm. She says trickster. She's meaning trickster and mimic entities.
Yes.
Could they be the same? Okay. So my question was going to be, is the experiencing of memory loss and time loss or lapse archetype?
I think that is once the archetype incarnates, pulls you into, and sometimes rituals, experiments, and all of that. That's when they pull the memory. And
Mm-hmm.
then, right, it's not, and this is my point that I made in prior shows. I think it may even with you, my friend, where it's not what they're wanting us to remember, it's what they're wanting us to forget. And so
That's it. Yes.
a lot of these cases, and this is what disturbs me the most about this case of Dr. Turner's, where when the experiencer was returned, there
Yes.
wasn't a lot of memory there. The only thing that remembered what happened to her was her body. It bore the scarifications, the
Yes.
sigils, the marks of what
Mm-hmm.
actually occurred. In in one of the latest, I think it was Jake Barber, or it might not have been him.
Mm-hmm.
One of the latest whistleblowers came out and said, "Well, these beings love us so much, that's why they wipe our memories away." I don't believe that's always the case.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, again, through memory regression, we're starting to realize that they've been doing some really naughty things to some really innocent people.
Yeah, and I think it's not all supernatural in play. I believe that it's very human in some cases, but
Yes.
but the thing that remains the same is yes, the memory being either. And here's another thing. Okay, let's go. We have memory lapse or loss, but let's talk about implanted memories,
Oh, yes, screen memories.
green memories,
100%.
exactly. Like not
What
just on a human
what
level,
is
but also on an ethereal
Mhm.
level.
Yes, and this is, demonstrably demonstrated
Yeah.
in, like, cases like Ted Rice, Betty Luca, even Dr. Carla Turner, where this is one of the craziest cases I've heard, where she's a researcher. She's like my favorite researcher of all time. But as a researcher and experiencer, she wasn't even fully aware of what they had done. Like there was at
Mhm.
one point when her son was being abducted, and so he's confiding in Dr. Turner. Dr. Turner gets a hold of his biological father. They have a powwow, and they're like, "Hey, listen, we need to talk about this stuff." And
Mhm.
so in the middle of the conversation, her ex-husband goes, "Carla, don't you remember when you were pregnant and lost the baby, and we didn't know where the pregnancy came from?"
Yes.
What? Yeah, we had to change. I didn't even bother washing um, the or the blankets or the pillows. I just threw them away and bought new ones because it was so bad. She had no memory of it.
See, right there. I can tell you things, man, I'm an experiencer,
Yeah.
generational, as well as paranormal. And my mother was pregnant with twins.
Mhm.
One was born, the other one, and it wasn't until later in
Ooh.
life where she was just sort of like, she goes, that yes, I was pregnant with twins. What happened to the baby? And
Mm.
and it just sort of defied, but the memory of it didn't come until literally maybe the last 5 years of her life. And then when she had the
Wow.
doctor check files, goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah, you were." See what I'm saying? It's crazy.
That's
It's
wild.
crazy, but we're
Mhm.
generational. We know it goes back.
Mhm.
So who knows? But this is a good question. Do you think they're
Mhm.
pulling memory, or is our mental status going above normal thought?
I think it's both, and unfortunately both, because it's not just that they're pulling memory, they're
Mm,
implanting other memories in their
mhm,
stead. And even with
mhm,
Ted Rice's case, his conscious memory said that he remembers hearing a disembodied voice speak to him when he was staying with his grandma one night. She
mm,
thought it was the devil, and so she curses, not like literal, not profanity, but curses, "I curse you in the name of Jesus,"
mhm,
that kind of thing. "Lord rebuke you." And that's all he remembers. And so for the rest of his life, he is entertaining guides. And this is another case study
mhm.
that demonstrates a unique pathology.
Mhm.
But it's not really unique. But anyway, so
It's
he's a
cool.
psychic medium. He's
Yeah.
dealing with these individuals. He's getting
Mhm.
insights and stuff, and yet his body is starting to demonstrate PTSD symptoms. So he goes into memory regression with Dr. Turner and Barbara Bartholic.
Mhm.
Now he starts to access all the memories they had blocked from him for 30, 40 years.
Mhm.
Now it's not just he was a little kid and he heard a voice and his grandmother rebuked it. Now it's, oh my
Mhm.
God, that voice took us.
Mhm.
We're in a ship. They want to do bad things. And when my
Mhm.
grandmother tried to stop them from doing the bad things, and this is where a lot of people, especially in theology, have a difficult problem because this should not be happening.
Mhm.
But the grandmother said, the Lord rebuke you. You're going to go to hell from where you came. The entity said, there is no hell and it's not going to work. I'm going to put
Mhm.
something in your head. You're going to lose your life. The next morning, she had a fatal
Mm.
stroke. She had a fatal stroke the next morning.
Mhm.
So,
That is crazy. That is just
but
crazy.
when he
Yeah.
went back, so you have these memory regressions that are, just, oh my God,
Mhm.
I have some things to deal with now. I didn't even know that
Mhm.
exist. Now he's going back to his guides.
Mhm.
They're eerily silent.
Funny that.
Could I
Wow.
suggest again that the mimicry, in that there are certain archetypes that it mimics as well, where it's almost like a new program superseded the old one. And now that you remember who we actually are, or a little bit
Mhm.
closer to the source of who we are,
Mhm.
you're not going to answer, you're going to answer to us. Those guys are completely abolished now.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. Hi, Jade. Yes. Um, that's a really, you know, it's a tough one because it leaves you with so many other different questions. And obviously, this is something that has been going on for, centuries, to say the least. I
Mhm.
can imagine the non-documented ones because
Oh, yeah.
this isn't new. I like to say I had somebody one time mention, well, we're the more evolved race. The races
Hmm.
evolve more every time there's a new kick at the can on the planet Earth, where it's more evolved. Where we're probably the least evolved,
Oh,
aside
yeah.
from like going back into the Neanderthal times. Like I truly believe that there were way more advanced cultures at that time, and I tend to wonder because of that if they were experiencing the same things that we are experiencing because of
Hmm.
the suppression and the conditioning that we have
Yeah.
experienced as a race.
I believe you hit the nail on the head, my friend. Well, first of all, I think we have many blind spots, and it's not just blind spots. We don't even know they exist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And whatever some of these beings are, or whatever the phenomenon is at large, it has the ability to manipulate those blind spots and
Mhm,
to really control us as a species.
mhm,
And one of the things that Dr. Carla Turner mentioned too was that it's possible that there is some kind of evolutionary spike within our species, that we are starting to wake up
mhm,
and actually remember what's happening, which
mhm,
places us in a unique context. Because if the only cases we are aware of are the cases people are remembering, which goes back to your point,
mhm.
all the others aren't even documented. So we could actually experience a much larger blind spot.
Yes, yes. And I also think, as many of the civilizations that came before us, you had a great deal of telepathy. I believe
Yeah.
that we were also more tuned in, so we would have connected thought-wise
Mhm.
with things coming in, whereas even though many of us have, like, as a race, have, telepathic abilities,
Mhm.
telekinetic abilities, all of this sort of thing, there are many who don't tune in, or should it be that we're not trusting
Yeah.
what we are experiencing because of
Mhm.
all the frequencies that are put out there. It just kind of
Yes.
everything messes with you right now. Everything.
You're right, and I believe that in some way it is the de-evolution of our species because,
Mm,
there are things within us, potentials that exist that we are in complete ignorance of. And I think that may be why each and every time we try to pierce the veil, something comes out.
Mhm.
Stop that, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that our best response to the phenomenon would be the evolution of consciousness,
Mhm.
evolution of the soul. And I think that even some of the evidence I've collected through the years, even some of the way they've been attacking us and hauntings and some of the malevolent remote viewing cases, it
It's
seems to be
amped
the
up.
soul first. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
the soul first and the skin second.
Yes.
And we're seeing it just from one aspect of it, not
Mhm.
understanding that there is a spiritual component to it all.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Um, essentially, see, I had one of those fleeting moments of a real, real
I
good
have them all the
question.
time.
Do you think that the veil, so to speak, do you think that the veil between our dimensions is just thinner, so things are coming in and out easier with more ease?
I think so. I think so. And
Or is it our awareness of these dimensions more now, do you think make us aware?
I think one is contributing to the other. I think that as more entities incarnate, the more aware we become of them.
Mhm.
And that and this has been the argument for the longest time.
Mm.
And I know where I think I know where I sit on this, but
Mhm.
people are suggesting that the paranormal itself is merely the nudging of an intelligence to where it's trying to trigger an evolutionary response in our species, and that's why it's there. And there are some cases, of just different experiencers that suggest that.
Mhm.
But like with Matthew Roberts, who was a witness of the Gimbal UAP, um, he said that he witnessed the craft itself, but then when he went back home, a voice came to him and began to point him in the direction of the occult. And then he started to have initiatory experiences. Now,
Mhm.
one of those initiatory experiences rather was being assaulted by a succubus.
Mm.
That's where I draw the line to
Yeah.
where, as an individual, you don't have to traumatize me
Mhm.
without my permission. You don't
Yes.
have to make me a victim in order to right. I don't have to be an initiate. It doesn't, those two ends do not meet for me.
Mhm.
And likewise, there are other abduction accounts where it just doesn't make any sense and it falls on its face. You don't
Mhm.
have to seduce me. You don't have to assault me. You don't have to employ ritual magic on me
Mhm.
to
Yes.
trigger evolution in me.
Yes. Yes. No, it's true, but I think it maybe we live in a physical place, and I think maybe we need to see physical things. Sparky says thought allows power to pass through the veil, so more that think of it, or the more you think of it, the more activity? Question mark.
There does seem to be some correlation, like, if you say the name of an entity or if you think of it, it will
Yeah.
manifest.
Mm.
But that's not to say there aren't cases where people are just living their lives
Mhm.
and they are interrupted, invaded by the impossible.
Mhm.
And next thing they know, they can't stop thinking about it. So it's kind of like a recurring nightmare.
Yes. No, it's true. It's true. All right. Do you have another one for us? We've got 15
um,
minutes.
15 minutes. Well, we're going to get into the Skinwalker Ranch,
Oh,
which
yeah.
in,
Let's do that one.
right?
Yay,
Okay.
Nathaniel. All right.
Yes. All right. So
Okay,
this
good.
is one of the more illuminating cases because it gives us insight into how many archetypes can be present at one location. A lot like
Mhm.
the scroll experiment.
Right.
And which led some researchers, Bigelow and other people that were there, to question if this wasn't what one somebody in the chat referred to as a singular intelligence. It's the same thing masquerading. It's diversifying its identity in our eyes.
Right.
And but anyway, Terry Sherman and his family, they often heard, which they were the original ranchers there, they had often heard voices calling out to them from the darkness. The voices, again, often mimicked their family members
Mm.
or their friends, but when they would go to investigate, they were no one's there.
Mhm.
It's completely
Mhm.
empty.
Right.
And one night they heard a deep, non-human voice laughing at them and repeating words that the husband had just said. So again, this implies a
Yeah.
learning matrix. Did you say that? I'm going to say this. Even in a kind of compile it into a leading theory here, because I know that now we can get into the real depth of the phenomenology after we went through the cases. But
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like is that there is a learning matrix that when it is in the proximity of your presence, it starts to download
Mm-hmm.
aspects of your life, what you
Mm-hmm.
believe in, who you are, who
Yeah.
you're in love with, who, and here's even deeper, who you would be attracted to. And then when it downloads a certain amount of information, then it learns what it can incarnate as, and then that's how it manifests.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Open so many doors, Nathaniel.
Oh, I know.
Open
Like
so many
you're
doors.
biting at the bit.
I
And
know.
this is the problem, and I've actually witnessed this in real time. Like when I lectured in the UK about a year ago, last
Mm-hmm.
February,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to this gentleman, and you could see that the phenomenon had presented himself to him through all of the archetypes so often and so much that when I asked him, I said, "Do you think it's possible that it's feeding into your belief system, that it's using you to mask itself,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's not really what you think it is? It's something
Mm-hmm.
different?" And
Mm-hmm.
when I watched him, he started to understand the theory.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see, and this is what I believe the phenomenon does, that it had created such a symbiotic relationship with him that, yeah, that if their model of the phenomenon is wrong, it has some kind of ontological shock within them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's co-created that model with the experiencer. And so
Mm-hmm.
much of my research now is trying to give them their autonomy back, to
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, listen, not everything that seems to be love and light is, and not everything that aggressively mimics the dead is in fact that.
Mm-hmm.
When I start to lay out these cases, I've witnessed this in real time where people are like, I just don't, I know it's possible, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't want it to be true.
Right. Right. So what's a catalyst?
Yes.
What's the catalyst for all of it?
To,
Is it us? Is there
I,
something about us that attracts this type of confrontation, this type of experience, this
yeah.
phenomenon? Or is it just that, like, how are we chosen? Are we, what is it by chance? Do you know what I mean? What's the
Yes.
catalyst for this?
So this is a fascinating question. This gets really deep.
Yeah.
So with the observer effect, the person has to be aware of something to observe.
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's like,
And
this
when
is like a double-edged sword, like a full
Yes,
circle.
you're
Okay.
right. You're right.
Okay.
But in the very first breaths of the experience, it arrives with the awareness. Something's here.
Hmm.
And I've seen it just as small and as light as something moved to the corner of my eye. And
Hmm.
then when I go to observe it, the phenomenon catches on, hijacks, not hitchhikes.
Hmm.
That implies consent. It hijacks consciousness. And now, right, it's like Nietzsche said that if you look into the abyss long enough, the abyss looks back into you.
Hmm.
Now you are observing it. But when
Hmm.
you are observing, you are also being observed. And that is when it triggers the co-creation of the archetype. And now
Yeah.
it's deep in it. I know.
Because there's just certain beliefs, like, for example, ufology. There's different triggers that will tell you, okay, what people speculate, why you would be a generational contactee, why you might be a MyLab contactee, why you might be, is it by chance? Is it because, like, what bloodline they're looking for? Like, I mean, blood type, there's
Mhm.
things. Paranormal, there's things. Wrong place, wrong time, or again, past life. Like, who the hell knows? It's a whole melee of things. But with this sort of thing, it's almost like people would ask themselves, what did I do to attract this kind of attention?
Yes.
And it's like, was it by chance, wrong
Mhm.
place, wrong time? Like,
all of the above.
All of the
And
above.
what's
Right.
interesting, I mean, I have a case in the 17th century where it was a child, and he is in an orchard, an apple orchard with his father. They're picking apples. His father says, "Okay, I'm going to go a little bit further. I'll meet you up for lunch." Right.
Hmm.
2 hours later, he comes back. His son's possessed. They're asking the interrogating the entity, like, "Why would you choose this victim?" And he said, "Well, I am a violent individual. I committed
Mm.
my very first act of violence in the same orchard at the same tree that person was picking."
Hmm.
So he was stalking his own crime scenes. So just something as simple as that,
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
right? It's just something, oh, I'm tripping over, right? And that's why it can be so dangerous to just do investigations for fun. I'm gonna go out there and hang out. It's like, okay, it's fine. But just know that you could trip over something.
Yeah.
Even the Warrens, they had this. They may have not understood it or not, and that's no slight against them, but I'm saying, some people don't, where they're
Research
in the
evolves. They were
yeah,
ahead of their time in many
right.
ways, and now you're the new kid on the block for the last decade and
Apparently,
a half, and that's
apparently.
it. Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
they're in there performing a seance, trying to, talk to the spirits there, and out of nowhere, suddenly something else incarnates. And they had no rules for that, Michelle. What
Yes.
is that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm going to take the mother. I'm going to box her in, break the bones, throw her against the wall. And that's where it's like the danger of,
Mm.
yes, in that particular case study, it could have been the phenomenon masquerading as the other spirits,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Hoping that they would be, oh, okay, you got something else for me. And
Mhm.
then the door was open and the proto intelligence manifested. Um, man, yes, but
Mhm.
that's where I'm at with it.
It's funny because I had a friend and colleague of mine when we were going
Mhm.
back to the possession thing. He had, somebody in her circle had
Mhm.
roommates who killed, or had a roommate who killed his own father and literally decapitated him. And when they saw him, this was done like, at a family cottage, but
Mhm.
everyone, when they all looked at him, it just said, like, wasn't even him. Was not even him. I mean, entirely different. It's just like,
Yes.
so you have this step in of
Oh,
whatever it is who completely infiltrated and did this deed.
yes. Could I suggest
Of course.
that the devil made me do it is not only a scapegoat people use?
Hmm.
That when, like, one of the leading qualifications of possession is not just language preference,
Yeah.
but it's having knowledge of something they have no experience of,
Hmm.
they shouldn't have
Hmm.
knowledge of. When Jeffrey Dahmer would perform his murders, he would perform necromancy afterwards.
Yeah, funny that.
Before the last murder, the only living victim, rather, told a story about
Yeah.
how when he walked outside of the bathroom. Jeffrey Dahmer is speaking in tongues, watching The Exorcist.
Get
So
into the Zodiac killer. Get into the Son
there,
of Sam.
oh
Get
my
into
God,
that.
yes,
Right?
absolutely, the Zodiac killer.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing all
Yeah.
of this for the afterlife. Everybody I kill will becomes my slaves.
Yeah.
What
Right.
this sounds like
Yeah.
is, and I'm just going to throw this out there, and we'll maybe have another show on this later on. But
Yeah.
what it sounds like is that some of these entities are performing ritual magic and ceremonies
Yeah.
to other avatars, and that some of these are murders to us, but sacrifices to the entity.
How we could get into a show and a half about
Right?
ritualistic stuff, Nathaniel, right down into a very big world that's starting to unfold right now publicly.
Mhm.
We can get into I sold out. I did this, I did that, and I
Yeah,
say
yeah.
let's do it. I'm gonna book another couple of shows with you, and
Okay.
we're gonna go deep
That sounds
because oh
fun.
my God, like um it
It's
goes it's so
disturbing.
far beyond. It is, because there is a lot of really deep roots with that. Even if you get into the whole Amityville thing, touching on like Ron DeFeo and things like
Right.
that. What like that's
A,
gonna
sh- a shadow gave him the gun? Let's just say if it didn't
yes.
happen, it didn't happen. But let's just entertain the
What if it did?
possibility of
Yes.
it. Yes.
Yes.
What
I
the
know.
implications of that are,
I know. Like it's that's a show that, that's a show and a half. I want
Yes.
to get you
Oh,
for a couple of different shows. We're going to go
okay.
there.
Cool.
Oh my God. Okay. The question, in my work, I've seen a lot of crime scenes, and many times after an hour or so, the area changes, gets heavy, like things are drawn to it. Thoughts, because I never heard anyone talk about that. Oh, I can give you crime scene stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
Or
definitely
just,
not unheard of. It's
no. Yeah. I think
this the
personally, Nathaniel, and tell me your thoughts on it. But when we are made up of energy, and when we die, especially if it's
Mhm.
violently and very sporadic, we leave an imprint like nobody's business.
Of
You know,
course.
there have been reports all over the world of when people pass away, people within the town or the space here, like almost like a sonic boom that can
Yeah.
trace back to times and moments of a passing. Like that tells you the amount of force and power and how much of an imprint our energy can potentially leave in the right conditions.
Oh yeah. I will give you a rather biblical account that goes back
Mm,
literally thousands of years,
yeah,
and it spawned an entirely new field in academia of wondering what they meant by this.
yeah,
Uh, this was when God said that your brother's blood is crying out from the earth.
yeah.
That there's geography located. This is where he was killed. His blood
Hmm.
is communicating.
Yeah.
That's a part of what I think we're dealing with here.
Yes, I think it's huge. So, in closing, we're nearing. Tell
Mhm.
me what you have coming up. Promote,
Oh,
promote, and then
um,
tight. Yeah.
I th- I have another show coming up. Other than that, actually, no, I have two. Did a show yesterday, I think it was. Yes, and then I think it was Carol Ann, right? And then
Carolyn,
after that, I am
well, you'll
kind
be
of
back here. We know
mistaken.
that.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We got to schedule that. I'm with you. That's what I
Well,
meant.
we're gonna
I'm with
schedule a
you
couple. We're gonna schedule a couple,
for
absolutely,
sure.
because I think this is your perfect time spot too,
Oh
with
yeah, I
you,
enjoy it.
you
I can
know.
go out and get some chicken wings after this.
I
Because
know.
sometimes,
Good.
I did. Oh my God, I did one show that we both know of, and it's the biggest. But I'm Eastern, and so Eastern Standard. And so like
Yeah,
I'm literally getting on at 3 in the morning and closing out at 5 in the morning.
done
And
it.
by
Yeah,
that time, right? By that time, it's like, oh.
I'm
So this is
dying. I
dude,
know.
it's so bad. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, all right.
I know.
But
I know.
yes, thank you so much,
Uh,
Michelle, for having me on. You're one of my favorite people in the field. You know that, and it's
thank
always
you.
an honor.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure having you on. It's just we go into so many different directions that afterwards
Oh
you're like,
yeah.
dang, you know.
Oh yeah. Like, what do we
But
do now?
oh gosh. But for those of you who are, tuning in, who have tuned in from especially the other side of the world, we sure have a lot of people coming in on from UK Europe way. So I guess we're hitting the nighttime over there. But you guys have all been tuning in, of course, to Beyond the Outer Realm with special guest Nathaniel Gillis, also one of my favorite people, Nathaniel, just so you know.
Heck yeah.
And
Thank you.
and it definitely has been enlightening. We definitely will be doing more for sure. Tomorrow night, guys, open mic on the Outer Realm, mysteries, forbidden knowledge, paranormal in the news, all that stuff. It's always, though everybody screams for that segment, and I'm happy to
Mhm.
present it. You guys have been spoiled over the course of the last probably 5 weeks with these things. Thursday, another friend of mine, Priscilla Cruz, or Rosado Cruz, returns, and it's going to be her year predictions as per each individual zodiac sign as per popular request and demand. She's going to come back. She's going to do it. Y'all welcome in advance, just so y'all know. So,
Mm.
but it's not going to be uncensored. So don't got so deep one time we had to bring her into an uncensored version of the show. So
Wow.
anyway, and to everybody who's new, thank you. We appreciate you so very much. And come around more often, Sparky. It's always interesting. The night shows are Wednesday and Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So you're going to have more Outer Realm over the course of the next couple of days, and you're going to see a lot more interesting stuff. And Nathaniel will come back because I already know in my head. I'm pretty sure Nathaniel knows what's in my head right now. So we're going to go with that also. So thank you all. Have yourselves a terrific evening, and we shall something. Thank you.
Awesome.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, everyone. So good night. Good afternoon. See you tomorrow on the Outer Realm.